The courtroom buzzed with the usual morning activity. Lawyers shuffled papers, court officials moved about with purpose, and the gallery filled with people waiting for their cases to be called. Among them sat Officer Karen Wilson, her police uniform crisp and her posture rigid. She had been on the force for 15 years in the West Side District, where she'd earned a reputation for being tough and uncompromising. Her colleagues respected her arrest record, but few knew how differently she treated people based on the color of their skin. Today, she was here to testify against Anthony Taylor, a black man she had arrested 3 months ago for allegedly breaking into a vehicle. Officer Wilson tapped her foot impatiently, checking her watch every few minutes. The case was straightforward in her mind. She'd caught someone where they shouldn't be, and now justice needed to be served. When they finally called the case, Anthony walked in with his public defender, a young man who looked overwhelmed with his stack of files. Anthony wore a simple dark suit that seemed a bit too large for his frame, borrowed perhaps, but clean and respectful. His expression remained calm despite the circumstances, his eyes focused ahead as he took his place at the defense table. Officer Wilson watched him with barely concealed distaste. Something about his composure bothered her. Criminals shouldn't look so dignified, she thought. In her mind, he'd already been tried and convicted. The fact that he had the audacity to plead not guilty only annoyed her further. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Judge Thompson was known for running an efficient courtroom, and today was no exception. After the formalities, he asked the attorneys if they were ready to proceed. "The people are ready, Your Honor," said the prosecutor, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Defense is ready, Your Honor," replied Anthony's lawyer, though his voice lacked confidence. As the prosecutor began her opening statement, Anthony leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer. The movement caught Officer Wilson's attention. Without thinking, she loudly said, "Hey, quiet down over there." The courtroom fell silent. The judge looked up, his brow furrowed in obvious displeasure. "Officer Wilson," Judge Thompson said firmly, "you have no authority to speak in my courtroom unless you are addressed directly." "Am I understood?" Officer Wilson's cheeks flushed red. "Yes, Your Honor," she mumbled, but her eyes still shot daggers at Anthony. The prosecutor continued her statement, outlining how Officer Wilson had caught Anthony breaking into a car late at night. According to her, the evidence was clear-cut. Officer Wilson's testimony, the report filed that night, and the circumstances of the arrest all pointed to Anthony's guilt. When it was the defense's turn, Anthony's lawyer stood up shakily. "Your Honor, my client was simply walking home after his car battery died. He was nowhere near the vehicle Officer Wilson claims he was breaking into. This is a case of mistaken identity at best, and at worst." He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. At worst, something more concerning. From her seat, Officer Wilson scoffed loudly enough for those nearby to hear. Judge Thompson shot her another warning glance, but she barely noticed. All she could focus on was Anthony's calm demeanor. Why wasn't he nervous? Most people she arrested could barely keep it together in court. As the proceedings continued, the tension in the courtroom grew thicker. Officer Wilson was called to the stand, her stride confident as she made her way to the witness box. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, her voice clear and unwavering. But as she sat down and looked across the courtroom at Anthony, something about his steady gaze made her uneasy. It was almost as if he knew something she didn't. She pushed the feeling aside, ready to tell her version of events, the version that would surely put him away. Little did she know, this routine testimony would soon turn her world upside down. 3 months earlier, the Westside Community Center was quiet as night fell. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago, but Anthony Taylor was still there, hunched over his desk with paperwork spread out before him. The small lamp cast a warm glow over grant applications and program schedules for the Youth Mentorship Initiative he'd built from scratch 5 years ago. "Just one more form," he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. The center had been his life's work, a safe haven for kids who needed guidance in a neighborhood that often didn't give them many chances. Tonight's paperwork was for a new program that would pair teenagers with local business owners for apprenticeships. When Anthony finally finished, the clock on the wall showed it was nearly midnight. He gathered his things, turned off the lights, and locked up the center. The cool night air felt good after hours in his stuffy office. He walked to his car, an old but reliable sedan, and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing happened. He tried again, still nothing. Not tonight, he sighed, popping the hood to check the battery. The terminals were corroded, and no amount of turning the key would bring the engine to life. Anthony closed the hood and pulled out his phone. His apartment was about 20 minutes away on foot. Not ideal, but not impossible either. He'd call a mechanic in the morning. Anthony had walked about 10 blocks, his mind busy planning tomorrow's youth basketball tournament, when bright headlights suddenly flooded the street behind him. Red and blue lights began to flash. He stopped, turning slowly as a police cruiser pulled alongside him. Officer Wilson stepped out, her hand already resting on her holster. "Hold it right there," she called out sharply, her flashlight beam hitting Anthony directly in the eyes. "Good evening, officer," Anthony said calmly, blinking against the harsh light. "Is something wrong?" The officer approached cautiously, her expression hard. "What are you doing out here at this hour?" "Walking home. My car battery died at the community center where I work." Officer Wilson's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "We got a call about someone trying car doors down the street. You match the description." Anthony felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, the same feeling he'd had during previous encounters with police. "I haven't been near any cars except my own, which is still at the center. I'm just trying to get home." "ID?" she demanded, not acknowledging his explanation. Anthony slowly reached for his wallet. "It's in my back pocket." "Keep your movements slow," she warned, her tone suggesting he was already guilty of something. As Anthony handed over his driver's license, a car alarm suddenly blared from about a block away. Officer Wilson immediately grabbed Anthony's arm, twisting it behind his back. "That's not me. I've been standing right here with you." Anthony protested as she roughly pushed him against the cruiser. "Sure," Officer Wilson said with clear disbelief in her voice. "Just a coincidence that a car alarm goes off while I'm talking to someone wandering around after midnight." She tightened the handcuffs around his wrists, ignoring his wince of pain. "I bet if we walk over there, we'll find a car with a broken window." "Officer, please. I run the community center on Maple Street. You can call the director of city youth programs to confirm. Her number is in my phone." Officer Wilson scoffed. "Right, and I'm the mayor's daughter." Under her breath, she added words that made Anthony's blood run cold. Derogatory terms no officer should ever use. Despite Anthony's continued calm explanations, Officer Wilson pushed him into the back of her cruiser. As they drove to the station, she called in the arrest, describing Anthony as aggressive and uncooperative, complete fabrications that he could hear clearly from the back seat. At the station, the booking process was humiliating. Anthony's requests to call someone were delayed for hours. When he finally reached his friend at the legal aid office the next morning, the damage was done. Officer Wilson had filed a report painting him as a career criminal caught in the act, rather than a respected community leader walking home after his car broke down. What Officer Wilson couldn't know then was that this arrest would set in motion events that would eventually bring them face to face in a courtroom and change both their lives forever. Back in the courtroom, the air felt heavy with tension as Officer Wilson took the stand. She sat with perfect posture, her uniform neat and her expression confident. The prosecutor approached with a friendly smile. "Officer Wilson, please tell the court what happened on the night of April 15th, the prosecutor said. Officer Wilson cleared her throat and launched into her story. "At approximately 11:45 p.m., I was patrolling the West Side area when I received a call about suspicious activity. A resident reported seeing someone trying car door handles along Pine Street. I responded to the scene and observed the defendant walking quickly away from the area." Anthony sat quietly at the defense table, watching as Officer Wilson described a version of events that bore little resemblance to what actually happened. His public defender, Mr. Rivera, scribbled notes occasionally but seemed overwhelmed by the case. "And what did you do next?" the prosecutor asked. "I approached the suspect, the defendant, and questioned him about his presence in the area. He was evasive and couldn't provide a good reason for being there so late. When I requested identification, he made sudden movements that concerned me for my safety." Anthony shook his head slightly, remembering how carefully he had moved that night, knowing the dangers of any perceived threat. "During our interaction, Officer Wilson continued, "A car alarm went off nearby. Based on the defendant's suspicious behavior and the timing of the alarm, I had probable cause to detain him. Upon further investigation, we found evidence linking him to attempted break-ins in the area." This was an outright lie, and Anthony felt his heart racing with frustration. There had been no evidence because he hadn't done anything wrong. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Thompson turned to the defense table. "Your cross-examination, Mr. Rivera?" Mr. Rivera stood, looking nervous. "Yes, Your Honor." He approached the stand hesitantly. "Officer Wilson, you stated that you received a call about suspicious activity. Did this call include a description of the suspect?" "Yes, it did. Male, dark clothing, in his 30s. "That's a pretty vague description that could match thousands of people, wouldn't you agree?" Officer Wilson frowned. It was enough to establish reasonable suspicion when combined with his presence in the area. Mr. Rivera shuffled through his notes. "You mentioned evidence linking my client to attempted break-ins. Could you be specific about what evidence was found?" Officer Wilson hesitated for a split second. "We found that he had no legitimate reason to be in that residential area at that hour." "Walking home isn't a legitimate reason?" Mr. Rivera asked. "He claimed his car broke down, but we had no way to verify that at the time." "Did you check later?" "That wasn't necessary given the circumstances." Mr. Rivera seemed about to ask another question when a court officer approached him and handed him a note. He read it, his eyebrows rising in surprise. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess." Judge Thompson checked his watch. "Very well. Court will recess for 15 minutes. As everyone stood, Anthony watched Mr. Rivera hurry out of the courtroom, clutching the mysterious note. Officer Wilson stepped down from the stand, glancing at Anthony with that same look of disdain. During the recess, the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. Anthony sat alone, wondering what could have caused the sudden break. From across the room, he could see Officer Wilson talking with the prosecutor, their heads bent close together in serious discussion. When the 15 minutes were up, people filed back into the courtroom. Mr. Rivera returned, but he wasn't alone. A tall man in an expensive suit walked with him, carrying a leather briefcase. They spoke quietly before approaching Anthony. "Mr. Taylor," Mr. Rivera said with a completely different energy than before, "this is Attorney Jackson. He'd like to join your defense team." The new lawyer extended his hand to Anthony with a confident smile. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "Things are about to change in here." As Judge Thompson called the court back to order, Officer Wilson returned to the witness stand. She noticed the new lawyer sitting beside Anthony and the subtle shift in the atmosphere of the courtroom. For the first time since the trial began, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Little did she know, her carefully constructed case was about to fall apart. When court resumed, the energy in the room had shifted. Attorney Jackson stood up, straightening his tie as he approached the witness stand. Officer Wilson watched him warily. "Officer Wilson," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I'd like to revisit the events of April 15th. You testified that you responded to a call about someone trying car door handles on Pine Street, correct?" "That's correct," she replied, sitting up straighter. "And what time did you receive this call?" "Approximately 11:45 p.m. Attorney Jackson nodded, then pulled out a folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit A." He handed documents to the judge and the prosecutor before approaching Officer Wilson. "This is the dispatch log from that night. Could you please read the entry for 11:45 p.m.? Officer Wilson took the paper, her confident expression faltering slightly. She cleared her throat. 11:45 p.m. Officer Wilson, end of shift check-in. Interesting. And is there any record of a call about suspicious activity on Pine Street? She scanned the document. It appears not to be in this log. That's because it doesn't exist, does it, Officer Wilson? The prosecutor jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Withdrawn. Attorney Jackson said smoothly. Let me rephrase. Officer Wilson, where exactly did you first encounter my client that night? On Oak Avenue, about a block from Pine Street. Attorney Jackson pulled out another document. Defense Exhibit B, Your Honor. This is a map of the West Side District. He showed it to Officer Wilson. Could you please mark where you encountered Mr. Taylor? She reluctantly marked a spot on the map. And now, could you show us where the Westside Community Center is located? She marked another spot several blocks away. Thank you. Now, Your Honor, I'd like to present Defense Exhibit C. He motioned toward the back of the courtroom, where a court officer wheeled in a TV monitor. This is security footage from the First National Bank, located here. He pointed to a spot on the map between the two marks Officer Wilson had made. The footage began to play, showing a quiet street at night. The timestamp read 11:52 p.m. A lone figure, clearly Anthony, walked calmly along the sidewalk. He wasn't trying car doors or acting suspiciously in any way. Officer Wilson's face tightened as she watched. The courtroom was completely silent. That's my client walking home after his car battery died, Attorney Jackson said. Nowhere near any cars, not trying any door handles, just walking. He paused to let this sink in, and here's what happens next. The video continued. At 11:54 p.m., a police cruiser pulled up beside Anthony. The encounter that followed was partially visible. Anthony standing calmly with his hands visible, Officer Wilson approaching aggressively. Unfortunately, this camera doesn't record audio, Attorney Jackson said, but this one does. He nodded to the court officer, who switched to another video file. Defense Exhibit D, Your Honor. This is footage from the convenience store on the corner, which has an exterior microphone for security purposes. The new video played, showing the same scene from a different angle. This time, they could hear Officer Wilson's voice clearly as she approached Anthony. What are you doing around here? Her voice demanded on the recording. When Anthony explained about his car, her dismissive response and the derogatory term she used under her breath were unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Officer Wilson's face had gone from confident to alarmed. Officer Wilson, Attorney Jackson said quietly, you testified that my client was evasive and made sudden movements. Does this video support that claim? She swallowed hard. The angle doesn't show everything. Perhaps, but there's more. He turned back to the court officer. Please play Exhibit E. A third video appeared, this one from Officer Wilson's own body camera, which she had claimed malfunctioned that night. This footage was retrieved during discovery, Attorney Jackson explained. Apparently, your camera was working just fine, Officer Wilson. As the body camera footage played, showing Anthony's respectful compliance and Officer Wilson's aggressive behavior, a bead of sweat rolled down her forehead. Her carefully constructed case was crumbling before her eyes, and everyone in the courtroom could see the truth. But the biggest shock was still to come. Attorney Jackson stood in the center of the courtroom, his presence commanding everyone's attention. Officer Wilson shifted uncomfortably in the witness stand, her confidence now completely shattered by the video evidence. Your Honor, Attorney Jackson said, in light of this evidence, the defense requests an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. The judge looked at the prosecutor, who was frantically whispering with her assistant. Does the prosecution have a response? The prosecutor stood slowly. Your Honor, we'd like to request a brief recess to review this new evidence. Granted. Court will recess for 30 minutes. As people began to move, Attorney Jackson added, one more thing, Your Honor. We have one more witness we'd like to call when court resumes. The judge nodded. Very well. During the recess, Anthony sat with his new attorney in a small conference room. How did you get all that evidence? He asked, still amazed by the turn of events. Attorney Jackson smiled slightly. Let's just say we had help from someone who believes in justice, someone who's been watching Officer Wilson for quite some time. When court resumed, the room was even more packed than before. Word had spread quickly about the dramatic turn in the case. Officer Wilson returned to her seat next to the prosecutor, her face drawn and worried. Judge Thompson called the court to order. Mr. Prosecutor, what is your position regarding the defense's motion to dismiss? The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, in light of the video evidence, the state withdraws the charges against Mr. Taylor. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Anthony closed his eyes briefly in relief. However, the judge said, before I rule on this matter, the defense indicated they have another witness. Mr. Jackson, you may call your witness. Attorney Jackson stood. The defense calls Commissioner Richard Thompson. The courtroom doors opened, and a tall, distinguished man in a formal police uniform, adorned with badges and commendations, walked in. Officer Wilson's mouth fell open in shock. The police commissioner himself was here, her ultimate boss. As Commissioner Thompson was sworn in, Officer Wilson gripped the edge of her seat. Something was very wrong. "Commissioner Thompson," Attorney Jackson began, "could you please explain to the court your relationship with Mr. Anthony Taylor?" The commissioner nodded. "Anthony Taylor is not just a community center director. For the past 8 months, he has been working directly with my office as part of a special task force investigating patterns of misconduct within our police department." Gasps filled the courtroom. Officer Wilson's face drained of all color. "So Mr. Taylor is, in fact, a deputy commissioner working undercover?" Attorney Jackson asked. "That's correct. Deputy Commissioner Taylor was appointed specifically to help us identify officers who may be engaging in racial profiling or other forms of misconduct. His community center work is real. He built that organization from the ground up. But for the past year, he has also been my eyes and ears in neighborhoods where we've received numerous complaints about certain officers." Officer Wilson looked like she might faint. The man she had arrested, the man she had treated so poorly, was actually her superior in the department. "Commissioner," Attorney Jackson continued, "was Officer Wilson aware of Deputy Commissioner Taylor's position?" "No. His role was strictly confidential, known only to myself and a small team in internal affairs. The purpose was to observe natural behavior of officers on patrol." "And did Deputy Commissioner Taylor file a report about his arrest by Officer Wilson?" "He did. His report, along with the video evidence you've presented today, is part of a larger investigation into Officer Wilson's conduct. We have documented 17 similar incidents over the past 3 years where she appears to have engaged in racial profiling." Officer Wilson's lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear. She barely seemed to hear him, her eyes locked on Anthony. "No, Deputy Commissioner Taylor," as the full reality of her situation became clear. Judge Thompson cleared his throat. "In light of this testimony and the evidence presented, this case is dismissed with prejudice." He turned a stern gaze toward Officer Wilson. "And I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential charges of false arrest, filing false reports, and civil rights violations." As the gavel came down, Officer Wilson realized that her 15-year career had just crashed down around her. The man she had treated with such contempt was not only innocent, he was her superior, and he had witnessed her true character firsthand. The news spread like wildfire through the city. By evening, every major news channel was running the story. "Police officer exposed in court. Deputy Commissioner reveals undercover operation." The courthouse steps became a stage for reporters and cameras, all eager to capture reactions from those involved. Officer Wilson slipped out a side door, head down and face hidden behind large sunglasses. Her lawyer hurried alongside her, trying to shield her from photographers. "No comment at this time," he repeated as they pushed through the crowd toward a waiting car. Meanwhile, Commissioner Thompson and Deputy Commissioner Taylor stood confidently at a hastily arranged press conference. "Today marks an important step toward accountability in our police department," Commissioner Thompson announced to the gathered reporters. "What happened to Deputy Commissioner Taylor is unfortunately not an isolated incident. Our internal investigation has uncovered a pattern of similar behavior from certain officers." A reporter raised her hand. "Deputy Commissioner Taylor, what was it like being arrested by one of your own officers who didn't know your true identity?" Anthony adjusted his tie before answering. It was exactly what it needed to be, a real experience that showed how some citizens are treated. I didn't want special treatment. I wanted to see firsthand what happens when certain officers encounter people who look like me. "And what happens next for Officer Wilson?" Another reporter called out. Commissioner Thompson's expression turned serious. "Officer Wilson has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal affairs investigation. Additionally, the district attorney is reviewing potential criminal charges related to false arrest and civil rights violations." Back at police headquarters, the mood was tense. Officers gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices about what had happened. Some defended Officer Wilson, claiming she was just doing her job. Others admitted they had seen her treat people differently based on race, but had never spoken up. Lieutenant Parker, who had supervised Officer Wilson for 5 years, sat alone in his office, reviewing her personnel file. There had been complaints before, 6 formal ones, but they had all been dismissed for lack of evidence. Now he wondered how many of those complaints had been legitimate. How had he missed the signs? Or had he simply chosen not to see them? His phone rang. It was the chief of police. "Parker, I need all of Wilson's cases from the past 3 years pulled for review. Every single one." "That's over 200 arrests, sir." "Then you better get started. We need to know how many innocent people might be sitting in jail because of her false reports." Officer Wilson arrived home to find reporters camped outside her apartment building. She hurried inside, ignoring their questions. Once in her apartment, she collapsed onto her couch, still in her uniform, and stared at the wall. 15 years on the force, gone. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop with calls and messages from fellow officers. Some offered support, but many others were distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with her disgrace. She picked up a framed photo from her coffee table, her police academy graduation day. She had been so proud, so certain she would make a difference. When had that changed? When had she started seeing some people as criminals before they had done anything wrong? The next morning, protesters gathered outside police headquarters. They carried signs reading "Justice for All" and "End Police Bias Now." The crowd grew throughout the day, their chants echoing through downtown. Inside the building, Commissioner Thompson met with community leaders in the conference room. "This isn't just about one officer," said Pastor Williams from the First Community Church. "This is about a system that allowed her behavior to continue for years." "I agree," the commissioner replied. "That's why I'm announcing the formation of a civilian oversight committee with real power to review officer conduct. And I'd like you all to be part of it." Across town, Anthony sat in his community center office, watching the news coverage. His phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from people he had helped over the years, all shocked to discover his second role as a deputy commissioner. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was a young man named Tyler, one of the teens from his mentorship program. "Is it true?" Tyler asked. "What they're saying on the news?" Anthony nodded. "Yes, it's true." Tyler seemed to process this. "So, all this time you've been a cop too?" "A deputy commissioner," Anthony corrected gently. "But the work we do here at the center, that's always been real. That's always been my first priority." Tyler nodded slowly. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe not all cops are bad." Anthony smiled slightly. "People are complicated, Tyler. The uniform doesn't make someone good or bad, their actions do." 6 months later, the city police department looked very different. The main entrance now featured a newly installed civilian complaint office where people could report concerns about officer conduct. Inside, fresh faces moved through the hallways, graduates from the new, reformed police academy, where cultural sensitivity and community engagement were as important as firearms training and procedure. Deputy Commissioner Anthony Taylor stood before a class of 40 new recruits, his badge gleaming under the classroom lights. "Your job isn't just to enforce the law," he told them. "It's to protect and serve all citizens equally. The power you'll soon have comes with great responsibility." The recruits listened intently as Anthony shared his story, how he went from community center director to undercover deputy commissioner and ultimately became the head of the department's new community relations division. His experience had become required learning for every new officer. "Any questions?" he asked as he finished. A young woman raised her hand. "Sir, do you ever regret going undercover? It put you in danger." Anthony considered the question. "I don't regret it. Not when I see the changes happening now." 17 officers with problematic records were removed from duty. Over 30 wrongful convictions were overturned. And most importantly, trust is slowly being rebuilt between the police and the communities they serve. After class, Anthony drove across town to a small cafe where an unexpected meeting was scheduled. When he arrived, he spotted her immediately. Former Officer Wilson sitting alone at a corner table, dressed in civilian clothes, looking much older than she had 6 months ago. He approached calmly. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come." Anthony sat down. When someone reaches out wanting to talk, I listen. A waitress brought them coffee, and for a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Wilson broke the silence. I lost everything. My job, my pension, my friends. I'll be starting my community service next week, and I'm in therapy as part of my plea deal. Anthony nodded but said nothing. I'm not asking for sympathy, she continued. I don't deserve it. But I wanted to tell you something. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking about why I did what I did. How I started seeing threats where there weren't any. How I stopped seeing people as people. Anthony watched her carefully. And what did you figure out? It wasn't one moment. It was little things over years. Stories from other officers, news reports, bad experiences that I let color how I saw everything. I started thinking that being tough meant being suspicious of everyone in certain neighborhoods. She looked down at her coffee. I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand it so I never go back to thinking that way. Anthony nodded slowly. Understanding is the first step. What will you do now? After my community service, I'm going to work with a youth program in my neighborhood. Kids of all backgrounds. Maybe I can do some good there. As they talked, across town, the changes continued. Community centers like Anthony's received new funding. Police walking beats were reintroduced, allowing officers to get to know the neighborhoods they served. Body cameras became mandatory, with footage regularly reviewed. The following week, Commissioner Thompson announced his retirement, naming Anthony as his successor. At the press conference, a reporter asked about the infamous courtroom moment that had sparked all these changes. Sometimes, Anthony replied, the truth needs to be shocking to be heard. What happened in that courtroom was just the beginning. The real work happens every day, in every interaction between police and the people they serve. That evening, Anthony visited his community center. Despite his new responsibilities, he still made time to coach basketball and mentor kids. As he watched teenagers from different backgrounds playing together, he felt a sense of hope. Change wasn't easy or quick. There were setbacks and resistance, but something fundamental had shifted in the city. A powerful light had been shown on a problem that had been in the shadows for too long, and people of goodwill, both inside and outside the police department, were working together to build something better. All because one man had the courage to face injustice and tell the truth, even when it was difficult. Sometimes that was all it took to start a transformation.